Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose, and there's something very interesting happening with the Nintendo Switch successor, the Switch 2, or whatever you want to call it. Now, there's always rumors circulating about this thing, and honestly, I try to avoid talking about most of them because they're just not credible, but today is a little bit different. We've now gotten two completely different reports that indicate the Switch 2's release window, and it might actually be sooner than some realize. So we're going to go over that today, as well as Xbox reaching a pivotal milestone. Fans asked for improvement and, well, Xbox delivered on this front. If you enjoy these type of videos, though, do hit that like, subscribe, and bell notification. It helps the channel a ton, and I greatly appreciate it. With that said, though, let's just go and get started off with one of my favorite games of all time, Zelda Oracle of Ages, and its twin, Zelda Oracle of Seasons. Nintendo just dropped these onto Switch Online last night. I mean, they previously announced these games. We all knew that it was going to happen eventually, but still, a nice little surprise here. And truthfully, if you have not played these games before, and if you like the classic Zelda experience, do yourself a favor and check them out. And even if you've never tried these old isometric Zelda games before, give them a try. I think they've aged remarkably well. In fact, I was actually playing Oracle of Ages on the Analog Pocket just earlier this year, and it's really as good as I remembered. Now, these games are kind of strange, though, in the sense that they are different experiences. It was kind of like their take on the popular Pokemon format at the time, where you released two different games. The difference with Zelda are a little more vast. In Ages, you can travel through time, whereas in Seasons, you control the seasons. Now, I do prefer Oracle of Ages myself. It's a little bit more puzzle-driven than Seasons, which personally I think is a better fit for this style of game. Now, Seasons is good and everything, don't get me wrong. I really recommend playing both, to be honest. But if you only have time for one, my recommendation would be Ages. Zelda Oracle of Ages was legitimately one of my favorite games growing up, and it's a game that brings back just such fond memories for me. Not only do I think it's an underrated Zelda experience, but I also view it as one of the best Game Boy games ever made, if not the very best. It and Pokemon to me are like your 1A and 1B when it comes to Game Boy games. If you want to check out Zelda Oracle of Ages and Seasons, though, they are available right now for you Switch Online subscribers. Now, speaking of Capcom, they did actually develop those Zelda games, if you didn't know that. But interestingly enough, as a part of their earnings call, they revealed they have plans to release an unannounced game that will sell millions of copies by the end of their fiscal year, which is by March of 2024. So whatever they're referring to here, it's going to come soon, and it will be a huge game. Not a lot of IP can sell millions in a short time frame, and that makes you kind of wonder, what are they talking about? I think the leading guess right now would probably be something Monster Hunter related. It's been a while since we've gotten Monster Hunter World, that released back in 2018, so its sequel would make a lot of sense here. And yeah, that would sell millions in no time flat. It definitely fits the description for sure. I mean, Resident Evil is kind of the other big Capcom franchise that would easily sell millions in that time frame. Could they have something Resident Evil related sometime here soon? Maybe early 2024. Technically, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 Remake released just 1 year apart, so it's not completely impossible simply because we got Resident Evil 4 earlier in the year. But still, I am leaning towards Monster Hunter myself. I do think that one makes sense. Either way, though, we likely won't have to wait too long for a more official announcement. Maybe Gamescom next month if it's planned to release later this year, unless maybe it's an early 2024 release, in which then TGS and the Game Awards are two other possible reveal locations. Let's go and get into this Nintendo story, though, because this is actually really interesting stuff. I mean, we all know a Switch successor is bound to happen at some point, and right now, history is on our side. Historically, the longest generation for a home Nintendo console is 7 years. That was the NES, which ran from 1983 to 1990, in which then we got the Super Nintendo. So just based on Nintendo's history and how long we've had the Switch, that released back in 2017, yeah, its successor is likely coming sooner rather than later. That's kind of why we get these daily rumors claiming they know all about it. Most of it's not credible at all. But I think most people right now are expecting a late 2024 release. That's the safe bet, I'd say. But according to two different reports over the last 30 days, says otherwise, and that instead, the Switch 2 will actually release in early 2024. Now, before we throw this idea out the window, there's actually reasons to believe this could maybe be plausible, and that's because this is coming from manufacturers. Not some random Joe on the internet that has an uncle that works over at Nintendo, not a self-proclaimed Nintendo leaker that lives on getting one thing right in the past that they might have just guessed in the first place, but instead this is actually coming from manufacturers that have historically worked for Nintendo. That's why these reports are just so interesting. Now, the first report came early in July, and that was from a Chinese company by the name of Foxconn. They're most known for manufacturing iPhones, but reportedly they also assemble consoles, including, yes, the Nintendo Switch. Well, in their financial report, they were quoted as saying, in addition, although the overall momentum of game machines this year is mediocre, with the traditional peak season coming in the second half of the year, game machine shipments are expected to increase compared to the first half of the year, and Nintendo plans to launch the Switch in Q1 next year. Now, at the time that this was first reported on, there was some skepticism. Maybe the translation is off. We've seen that kind of happen before. And, it's just one single report. No big deal. It could be wrong, but that right there is where things start to get interesting, because today we now have a second manufacturer that mentions something very similar. This time from another Chinese manufacturer, PixArt. They've long worked with Nintendo on various consoles over the years, such as the Wii, the Wii U, and yes, again, even the Nintendo Switch. Well, according to their financial report, they revealed that they're supplying parts for a new Japanese console that hasn't launched a new system in years, and that it will release in early 2024. Early being the key word here. Now, to be fair, they didn't specifically mention Nintendo by name, so there's some speculation involved. Technically, this could be the Sega Dreamcast 2 for all we know. But again, considering they've worked with Nintendo before, and considering the other report that we just talked about, it's all kind of coming together. An early 2024 release is actually plausible, and in certain ways, this does make sense. Nintendo needs a new console. We all know this. It's been obvious for a while. Xenoblade 3, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and definitely Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, they need a more powerful console. As good as these games are, a more powerful console would really kind of take these games to the next level, ensuring up their just clarity and overall performance. Again, I think especially when it comes to Pokemon, its performance honestly is just not acceptable. And there was actually even a rumor earlier this year that Nintendo was going to drop its performance update with the upcoming DLC next to the Switch successor. Now, I'm not saying that rumor was true, who knows, but it does kind of line up with this. That's all I'm saying. More so, just look at the Nintendo Switch. It never needed to launch during the holiday to have success. It launched early in 2017, and it's gone on to be their most successful home console of all time, or hybrid, I guess. So they've done it before, and that leads us to another question. If Nintendo really plans on an early 2024 release with the Switch successor, when exactly and when will it be announced? Well, I think based on these reports here, I think that really could be any time in the first half of 2024. While the first report mentioned Q1 specifically, the translation never actually confirmed whether that was for the calendar year or if it was for the fiscal year, which that is important because the fiscal year would begin in March of 2024. So with that in mind, that narrows things down to the first 6 months of 2024. And even though I know people are excited that this is all going to happen sometime soon, or that's the way it appears right now. So now people are kind of looking at when will it be announced, and I've seen a lot of speculation for 2023, but I'm just going to go and stop you there. I don't think it's going to get a 2023 announcement. Now, this is just my own personal opinion, but I believe Nintendo will focus on the Switch this holiday to ensure its momentum isn't affected. And then after that, well, then in early 2024, they could make their announcement and put their marketing towards the Switch successor. I think that would make the most sense. They don't want to kill the momentum for the Switch too early, especially during that holiday period. They want to really capitalize on those holiday numbers. So right now, that's my own guess. But either way, very, very interesting stuff here. Two different manufacturers, both pointing towards early 2024. Let me know what you all think, though. Do you believe these manufacturers, or do you suspect they're wrong? Now, we also got some news for Xbox, as they just surpassed a pretty major milestone for both the brand as well as for consumers. One thing that Xbox fans have really clamored for is better Japanese support. I mean, if you like Japanese games, it was pretty rough last generation for the Xbox One, and a big part of that problem really just kind of comes down to the success, or the lack thereof, that they had in Japan. Japanese developers did not want to support the Xbox One because the Xbox One was abysmal in their home territory. Why would they want to support a console that they can't sell their games in Japan? That was kind of one of the dilemmas that they faced with the Xbox One. Well, Phil Spencer has put in a lot of work to ensure that that won't happen again, and the results, they really speak to that. The Xbox Series is now officially the second best-selling generation for Xbox in Japan. It's now sold 473,000 units in Japan, pushing it past the original Xbox. Now, it is still far away from the Xbox 360, which sold 1.6 million units in Japan. We'll see if it can kind of near those numbers over time, but this is still such a huge improvement over the Xbox One, which only sold 114,000 units. I mean, in just their third year, they've already basically quadrupled the Xbox One's total units sold in Japan. That's pretty crazy if you think about it that way. So I know some people will scoff at 473,000 units sold. That's nothing compared to the PlayStation, and especially Nintendo. The Switch really is a beast in Japan, but this is progress for Xbox, and that's why this is such a big deal. Obviously, Xbox still has work to do there. Not trying to ignore that. A lot of Japanese games still skip the Xbox Series. We see that a lot with smaller Japanese games. Square Enix is apparently allergic to Xbox from what it seems, but we have seen an uptick of Japanese support on Xbox this generation. We've seen better support from companies like Bandai Namco with games like Tales of Arise and Scarlet Nexus. Sega and Atlus, they've been big supporters with games like Persona and the Yakuza series, and we've even seen some smaller games like Danganronpa. That's one thing that I've kind of noticed, though. A lot of these games are actually coming to Game Pass day one. Even with Capcom, they've been big Game Pass supporters. I mean, they just released Exoprimal into the service, and they also have another day one title coming later this year. And I think one of the reasons for that is because I think that gives these Japanese developers an immediate payout, which might make their decision a little bit easier. But more so, it's an opportunity for them to grow their franchises on Xbox. It's a way for them to put their games in front of 25+ million players, a lot of which might not have played their previous games. And if they release another game in the future, well, then those same people might buy their next iteration. Ni no Kuni, as an example, with both 1 and 2 available in Game Pass, if Level 5 ever decides to make a third game and releases that on Xbox, those Game Pass inclusions will certainly help with the Xbox fan base. So this really is just such great news for fans of Xbox and Japanese games. In this case, kudos to both Xbox and fans alike. Now, speaking of sales numbers, we of course need to talk about the king of home consoles, PlayStation. For decades, Sony has dominated this area, and that continues on with the PlayStation 5. Now, this is kind of expected by this point, but officially the PlayStation 5 has sold 40 million units worldwide. Now, this isn't quite as fast as the PlayStation 4, which sold 40 million 2 months faster, but you also have to kind of understand that the PlayStation 5 has been sold under very different circumstances. Up until this year, the PlayStation 5 has been shorted on supply, no thanks to the many issues that console makers have faced this generation. But as PlayStation pointed out themselves, they have fixed that problem with an abundance of supply available now. So this is going to be very interesting to kind of follow going forward to see if the PlayStation 5 can ultimately keep up with the PS4 now that it has that ready supply, or maybe even surpass it eventually, possibly even soon. This holiday will be an important one with one of their most popular games set to release, Spider-Man 2. So with that, by the end of 2023, the PlayStation 5 might be able to catch the PlayStation 4. Of course, if it does, I will let you all know about it, but just big congrats to Sony. Honestly, they've earned it. They have a loyal fan following for good reason. Historically, they've made great consoles and great games, and with each PlayStation generation, they've mostly found success because of those reasons. The PlayStation 3 was really their only home console blunder, but even with that console, they might have struggled early on. $600 didn't help it, but they still ended that generation with a bang. It still sold 90+ million units, and they released a ton of great exclusives. So if that was their weakest generation, that's still not bad, all things considered. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day. Though we're asked you all, do you collect controllers? There's always new limited edition controllers, and I've seen some really nice collections out there, but only 13% of you said yes, whereas 82% of you said no. So while the majority doesn't collect controllers, there's still definitely a small group of people out there that does, and I mean, I understand. I'm a big collector myself, not really so much when it comes to controllers, but there are some really nice looking controllers out there. Every once in a while, even for myself, I will buy a controller, not because I need it, but simply because I really like the design. The Forza Horizon controller, as an example, I have that one displayed because I mean, it just looks so good. I might pick up the Spider-Man PS5 controller as well. We'll see about that one. But yeah, I completely understand. If you do collect controllers, though, let me hear from you. Let me know how you display them. I've seen walls of these things. Some people get individual stands to display them. I actually have a couple of those cable guy stands, if you know what those are. One of Spyro and another of Crash Bandicoot. But yeah, let me know how you display these controllers if you do collect them. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget to bell the notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.